Hello, everybody. Welcome to Boss Rush Book Club Special Panel. This is a game podcast where we talk about something that we played over a month and discussed it. But this is a special episode because it's a particular game that I had to get two guests on here to talk to me about. And we've been literally talking about this game. You guys just don't know. But joining me is the Celestial Brush, Celeste Roberts.
Hey, good morning, evening, twilight, whatever time of day it is for you guys.
Oh, please let that rumor Skyward Sword become the Switch be so true.
I can't deal with those motion controls. I mean, I love that game, but sometimes you just want to sit down and play a Zelda game, not have to sword fight.
You don't always want it. You don't always want it to be a workout.
I actually think they reworked it. I think they're gonna fix it to where it fits the Pro Controller and the Joy-Cons. I think they did.
Please do. Please, Nintendo.
Yes. But also joining us from Retrovania, it's Billy Holiday.
Hello there, guys. Thank you for having me. I've clocked enough time into these walking sims that it's great that it's finally paying off for me.
Well, anytime we do a walking sim episode, we will contact you.
Please do, because I can't get people to talk about these things. I put these on around the house. It's the best way to clear out a room.
Oh,
Unfortunately. So I'm glad to speak to some folks that appreciate them.
You know, that's funny because I played this game twice, and both times my boyfriend seemed very interested, and he was asleep on the couch.
Yeah. I will say it's not a boring nature. It's a very relaxing nature to the game that must do that to people, because we've had similar experiences here in this house.
But yes, we're talking about What Remains of Edith Finch today.
Yes. This game was developed by Giant Sparrow, published by Perna Interactive. They do a lot of stuff with indie developers. Directed by Ian Dallas. And it was also written by Ian Dallas. The music composer is Jeff Russo. There is on Unreal Engine 4, and you guys can find this game available on Windows, PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and Nintendo Switch. And this is a single-player adventure game, and we're going to get right into it. So the game starts as you on the boat, and you're being carried to this house that you're going to be visiting. And when that happens, you're just looking around a little bit, and then you open up a book and the game starts to narrate to you. And so you start hearing the voice of Edith Finch. And so she's telling you her journey when she visited the house years ago and what she found in it. And then you take control of Edith Finch.
Can I say that when I saw those lilies in the hand of the first character, that kind of signaled something to me.
I think the game throughout is going to use heavy use of symbolism here and there. And I'm glad you mentioned, because I completely missed this the first time I played through. You mentioned in the introduction to the game there that, yes, you are playing through the core gameplay is not necessarily that character sitting there at the beginning. What is taking place is in the book. You're reading, which I think is something I missed it the first time. Like when I just sat down and was playing through, and I assumed everything I was playing at that time was happening kind of, live at the time. Especially as we go through and talk about the plot and talk about other things throughout, what makes sense, what doesn't. A gigantic factor is just that. This is something, this is a story that this main character here at the beginning is reading. That's a big thing to remember.
I didn't pick up on that either at first, my first playthrough.
And it's Snyder Day with when you're trying to reason out some of the things that take place when you realize that. Took me the second time to notice.
Yeah, I think it was when it did the cut, and then you show up that you're already on the land, because you don't really take that control of that character and get off the boat or anything. And there is a purpose for everything, but we're going to say that for the end. So you take over control for Edith Finch, and now this is cool because I played it on PlayStation 4.
Mhm.
You have two ways to get to the house, and depending on which way you take on your first playthrough, if you do it the other way, you'll get a achievement or a trophy
Mhm.
for that. So and I thought that was really cool because I'm just like, when I played it first, I'm just like, okay, I did take the main role, but I didn't take what was underneath on the ground.
Yeah.
And you get this key, you try to figure out what is this key for.
Mhm.
When you get to the house, you try to put it to the door, it doesn't open, but then you go around and you find a door that has those dog doors or pet doors that people could get in, and your character squeezes through, and then you go into the journey. um and it kind of has a purpose after that,
Mhm.
with it. When you get into the house, you see different doors and you can explore around parts of the
Mhm.
house, but not the whole thing. So
Mhm.
it's not the go home situation where if the first playthrough of Go Home, you search everywhere in the house, and you know that that game has shortcuts. So if you
Mhm.
do those shortcuts, you can beat the game early if you
No
Yeah.
already know it.
spoilers.
But that's for Gone Home. If
Yeah.
that's the replay value for that.
Yeah.
The replay value in Edith Finches is that there are things and choices that you can make. If you make them for the first time, it allows you to go back
Mhm.
and remake those choices. But you might get caught up in the whole adventure again and miss
Yeah.
some things if you don't pay attention.
Mhm.
Uh, so you're playing as Edith Finch, and what were your guys' first things to do? Because I went to the kitchen and I started, pressing the X button because they allowed me to look at the
Mhm.
Chinese food,
Mhm.
look at the menu. Like I did that for the first thing in the kitchen. But what did you guys do?
It
Uh,
You
it
go
it
first, Billy.
Okay. It took me a long time to get into the house. Because the first thing, you get a great view of this just monstrosity of a structure. It is not a house that is built in any logical way whatsoever. And they tell you pretty early on that the great grandmother Edie, a character that you'll hear referenced throughout. One of the Even though she's not alive at the time of the game,
mhm.
plays a gigantic. She's in the background the entire time, basically. Just continued adding rooms, closing off rooms of this house, adding on rooms, and that's how you end up with what you get. And it gives you such a tremendous look at it early on that I just got. And I'm one of those that I like to look at every little thing, every little detail. So I spent maybe the first 15, 20 minutes, the first time I played this, outside of the house. There's not a lot to do. Before you go in, you can find a little pond where there's some kind of bizarre. You read more about it as you go through the game. Some bizarre, like broken down wooden dragon sculpture or bit out there in the pond. There are missing posters for a Milton Finch all over the place.
Mhm.
There's all kinds of stuff to be seen out there. Depending on how much detail you want to look into it. You may not be out there examining every little blade of grass, which I can't blame you for that. But no, once I got in the house, they kind of start you off in a garage area, and you still really don't know what's going on. You're not 100% sure if you're alone in this house. You don't know if you're going to meet somebody there. She's already said that the house has been abandoned. For I believe it's 7 years at the time that Edith is telling her portion of the story.
Mhm.
But you don't know. The electric's out from the parts you're walking around in, and it's just a really quiet house. There are definitely signs that there have been life in the house. That you've got the food containers, scattered around. Edward pointed out the iPod still sitting on the charger.
Who just leaves their expensive iPod?
Hey,
Right.
that's right. Got money to burn. A big house like that, you can't hide money. We'll just get another one. But no, there are all these little signs of life in there, and I just spent the first little bit assuming that the house was vacant all these years, just kind of exploring, and you get a feel kind of for how maybe day to day life was there in the house? A lot of books to be had, a lot of cans of tuna sitting around also.
Yes.
And I love that you see all this stuff. You're like, what is all this? And they have a way of, throughout the game, kind of explaining some of the stuff she explains at the time. It was one of her brothers that had a job at the factory, canning factory. That's how they ended up with all this here, and other things that you see early on just scattered around the house that you'll hear throughout the tales of the game, and it clicks. And you're like, oh, okay, that's what that is. And I love the way they do that. How you just explore this house, not knowing what or even who you're going to see in the early goings.
Did you guys notice? This is the first thing I did. I'm weird with games. My first thing to do is turn around. And there's a gate, and you can see the road. There's a bench.
Yeah.
But Edith points out that it looked like someone else had hopped the fence, and that has stuck with me. So I'm wondering. So when I first played this game, I played it twice. I thought, oh gosh, is there going to be a jump scare? Is someone going to murder me? Is someone waiting for me? And then, of course, you see Milton's missing posters all about. So that kind of sets the tone. The atmosphere seems very despondent, very sad. And you can check the mailbox. There are all these invoices. I'm like Billy. I will explore everything. I will talk to every NPC. You would probably not want to watch me play a video game because I will talk to them multiple times to see if they say different things. You also, Billy pointed this out in a pre-show discussion. It's not just once, but there's a deer at the beginning. And Ed, did you happen upon the deer walking towards the house?
No, I did not.
Okay. I think it's at the top portion.
The top. If you take that top, that top road.
Yes.
Okay.
And so whenever I see animals, I like to look into the symbolism of things. I also like to look into the symbolism of names. So Finch, I thought, okay, well, I immediately thought Atticus Finch from To Kill a Mockingbird. He's probably the most famous one. And apparently, finches, I don't know if I've ever really seen one, but they're apparently very sensitive and very vulnerable. They're supposed to be kind of like healing birds. Are you guys into that kind of stuff, like looking up the names?
I was, after you had mentioned it. I was like, well, I mean, because I don't think they put anything in the game. Hats off to them. I think every single thing placed in that house, from book titles to everything in there, the deer encounter, right down to the names. They put the work in on this. No one was slacking off in the production of this game. So yeah, as soon as you mentioned it, I thought it was kind of worth looking into for this one. It's not something I normally do to that great an extent, but it's certainly a game that has kind of earned giving it that little extra bit, of inspection. I did find essentially the same thing you did, and I thought that was very, very interesting. They're presented as a very kind of sensitive, kind of frail creature of sorts, which does kind of go with an entire family that is as we'll go along, has befallen these horrible these terrible fates as we go.
And you do see on their front door, if you're like me and I didn't go to the side by the garage, the doggy door, their front door has this beautiful stained glass Finch on it. So that's just those little details. This game, these developers did an excellent job with.
Which is why it drives me crazy. I don't know why it is, and this will not be the only instance of it. There's several others throughout the game. You're here, you've been told at this time this house has been left. All you know is your mother picked you up and just immediately left right there on the spot. You don't find out more about that until later. So you go in this knowing that this house has sat. But the food initially, the food kills me out in here. There's Chinese food scattered throughout, not like a copious amount, but there's a little bit left on this plate. There's a little bit here in this box. It's not like imagine we've all probably left something sitting out and didn't know it for like 2 days, and then you know it. Then you know it's there. This has been there's not a state of decay to it, like I thought, and I coupled that with your comment about her, feeling like maybe there was someone else. So at this point in time, I didn't know if we were dealing with maybe still a lived-in house, maybe still someone around. I have no reasoning why, and there are other food items as you go. No reasoning why they're not just completely rotted. I don't know why it's not a kitchen full of flies. Who knows?
Because I don't want to get to the end just yet about that, because I have an idea on why that didn't happen. My thing was just like, it's been a long time. No one's been in the house.
Yeah.
Why haven't this house been condemned? Why? I'm like, is the house already paid for? And I'm assuming it is, because this house is a character amongst itself.
Yes.
And the reason why I say that is that when you go throughout the story, you keep finding different rooms and the secrets that it hold when you're progressing. And just like us, we have a presence of what people see, but there's secrets to us that nobody don't know about. And that is part of our character. That's kind of like our human nature in a sense. Yeah. And so while you're going through it, the house gets bigger and bigger. And it's just like, who built this and how was this created? And they do explain that sometimes, but you'd be like, the way that this house is designed, you would think everything will fall, but yet it still stands.
It's an ocean nightmare.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And Edward said, I wrote down really big here. A category is the house has a character. And that's exactly right. They do a great job of kind of personifying the house. And even Edith there, when you get the good view of it, early on, it just flat out says she's feeling not sure what she felt about the house when she was younger. And, she's kind of going over her feeling and finally admits that she is afraid of this house. She has actual fear towards this structure.
Isn't the Edgar Allan Poe? It's been a long time. There's an Edgar Allan Poe story called "The Fall of the House of Usher." I think isn't the house personified?
I believe it is. I have not clocked in some time on that one, but I think it is.
It's been a little while, so I believe there are a bunch of either short stories, novellas that do have houses personified. So I wonder if they took their inspiration from that. But that's a good point, Ed and Billy, about it is a character of itself, and there are so many references to it throughout the game. So yeah.
So let's get into the first family member. I forgot her name.
Molly.
Molly. Okay. So Molly is the first one that you start reading about. And she tells you that she got sent to bed without nothing to eat. So she wakes up and she starts eating things, and as she goes on, she starts transforming and eating more and more. And while she's transforming, she's using different things, and they change the gameplay. And this is when the time we first get like literal gameplay. So you transform first into a cat, and then you transform into a hawk, and then you transform into a shark, which then transforms into this octopus weird kind of monster, and then you end up transforming back into yourself. What did you guys think of it? Did you think that this was a nice change, or how did you feel about Molly in general? Because I literally was lost on, like, okay, when she ate the berries off the Christmas tree thing, I thought she should have died from that, because that's poisonous. And it's just like, ooh, I'm still hungry. And it's just like, no, you should be dead. Like, I'm assuming that she fell asleep and went into a dream world, and then when she came back to reality, she wrote down her dream. But we don't know how she died.
She's the first time I played it and I transformed into that shark, I did laugh because it was just so absurd. It fell down into these woods and it's rolling down these hills, and I I think I said, excuse my language. What the fuck?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Because it's a pretty straightforward game before that. It doesn't seem like you're going to be dealing with anything of the fantastical nature at all. So that it's a departure. But no, I definitely she gets up. She's hungry. She's for whatever reason, as Ed was saying, sent to her room. Calls out to her mother, who will not allow her mother, who is Edie, and go to bed basically, and she proceeds to eat a myriad of all the things you tell children not to eat. She's eating old hamster food. She's taking down a tube of toothpaste. She's eating the berries, which the berries themselves, in and of themselves,
But she won't eat her own goldfish.
No,
or fish.
You got to draw the line. You gotta have standards.
You already ate the hamster's food, like.
Oh God.
But I appreciate the animal lover in her for not eating the goldfish. But and then like Ed's saying, this bizarre series of transformations occurs, and the first time I played through, I took a lot of the game kind of at face value. I will not put a number to the amount of times I played this, because it's not pretty. But then at subsequent times, you'll notice, like if you spend some time, and this is how we're basically going to play the entire game. We're going to read these diary entries. We're going to look at these shrines that Edie has built for family members that have passed, and we'll go essentially and read the stories that are left for them. And the one thing I noticed people around the her bathroom door there. She's got a series of masks, like the little masks that cover just your mouth. And she has an owl, which is one of the transformations, a cat, which is a transformation, rabbit, which she's hunting down throughout, and a duck. She has various masks on there. So I'm thinking at this point in time, all right, she's had the berries, and this is a trip. This entire thing that's happening now. There's two ways to go about it. One, this is just a trip that she is having. As far as the sea monster creature goes, she's got the stuffed, jellyfish with the long tentacles there on the bed. They're all things in the room that are part of what she is supposedly seeing, if you want to take it at face value. But I find it a little hard to think that she's eating all this stuff. She obviously is unwell, that she has, just sat down and now is penning just this perfectly written diary entry. I find to be a little strange. I assume she's done all this, she's eaten all this, and she has died from what she has consumed. Which is sad, very sad, and is a kind of unremarkable, death of sorts, which I think is going to be the theme here of people dying. My own personal take into it, and what we'll talk more about it later, is just these deaths that are maybe just very basic, that are just accidental, and it sucks that it happened that way so easily. And it's hard to accept that. It's hard to accept you lost. It's hard to accept you lost a 10-year-old to the fact that you sent them to bed without dinner, so now they ate all this stuff and they poisoned themselves. And maybe there is more comfort, or maybe there's a way to alleviate guilt by making these simple deaths a more kind of fantastical, maybe putting a more fantastical story to them, from the character that would be Edie, that creates the shrines and all that. You lose your child. Maybe her mind went, kind of in a fantastical direction itself, as she sits there and writes this, and maybe not even in a negative means, like as a method, because she's admitting that in this diary entry, that the child was sent off to the bed without food. She's not declining that she had a hand in it, but maybe it's just a easier way for her to deal with it, or to know that her child is being remembered through such an amazing story, rather than, yes, the kid ate a bunch of bad shit and went to bed and died. And that was just my takeaway from that. And I think it is something that weighs heavily on Edie throughout. As you'll see, it's mentioned later on that there's a cat named Molly, that they picked up for another one of the children. And there's also, at the very end there, after you finish doing all this, there's a cat outside of the window, which is the same window in Molly's supposed adventure she went on.
Mm-hmm.
She turned into a cat next to that very same window, which is interesting.
Yeah, and like you were saying, how could someone, especially a child, be so coherent if you're having?
Yes.
I don't know what the symptoms would be. I guess lots of vomiting.
Yes.
But hers was a very creative way to deal with the loss, and I think if you look at the timeline with her siblings. She's the oldest, and then I think Barbara's only about 3 years old. I think
so. Yeah.
I don't think Walter, Sam, and Calvin are around yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Calvin was. I wrote down everyone's dates. Molly passed away in 1947.
Yeah,
Calvin. Yeah, Calvin would be born in 1950. So yeah, Molly was the oldest, definitely at that point in time.
Right, because Calvin was 11 when he passed. Barbara was 1944 to 1960, so she was 16
on her 16th birthday.
Yeah. Gregory was 1970, 76 to 70. He was 1 year old.
Yeah, but that's her grandchild. That's Edie's grandchild. Yeah.
Sven, who is the dad, he was 1915 to 1964. So he passed when he was like 49. And then Uncle Walter, I didn't get his dates.
2005 or 2002.
Yeah, I think it's 5 was the date of death on this one.
And what about
53?
And then what about Sam? I think I didn't get his neither.
Sam
Finch, because Odin Finch, Ina Borg, and son Jahan, they were 1880 to 1937. That's when they shipped that house, and it had the accident.
Oh, and if you haven't played the game, there are a lot of spoilers, but Edith keeps a journal where she has a literal family tree where she's documenting everyone's birth and death date. Yes. He dies. Sam was born in 1950 and he died in 1983. So he was pretty young. He was 33 years old.
Yeah. Okay. And the best thing after you leave Molly's room is you kind of figure out at this point in time, to even get in Molly's room, you kind of figured out you're not going to be traversing the house by traditional means.
Because the doors are locked.
Yeah, all these doors are locked. There are several peepholes you can look into, which fortunately you'll get to go into all these places over time. So there's not a lot of just open a door, walk down the hall, walk in the next one. It's like Ed was talking about early on, the house has a way of kind of opening itself up to you and revealing its secrets as you go along. After Molly's room, you have to essentially go out the window to kind of get to the next room, which I think Edie's room, I believe. Yes. And that has got a for early on in the game, and I think it's there on purpose. It has a treasure trove of details to take a peek into. Some of them will immediately shed some light on things, and I think other things in there you're meant to see and kind of later on in the game look back to it and have that kind of that aha moment with it.
Yes, because Edie seems to really like dramatization and attention from what I
Yes.
gather. But I mean,
Yes.
she claimed that this comes later on, but one of her sons is living underneath the house, and she's interviewed about a mole man living beneath the house. And there's a newspaper article that she framed that's talking about how she refused to evacuate during a fire. She was being stubborn.
Yeah, and another thing I noticed, yes, all that she has no problem being front and center, kind of.
Yes.
The center of attention. And another thing I noticed, the first thing is when you enter through the window, there are a lot of different books there, and I found like a lot of the titles kind of, I thought, really tied in with some of the things throughout. And I don't know, because already my second playthrough in my head, once I figured out, okay, Molly's story does not set well with me as being written by her. I'm kind of, at this point in time, I'm thinking, well, Edie is the one that it outright tells you is making these shrines, these little memorials, these makeshift kind of memorials. And you can even see in the room where she has like obviously these little files or these books somewhere she's kind of practicing. She's got like concepts, and you can't read them, but I think there's like a Molly concept. There's several books with various deceased family members' names that kind of makes you think, okay, she's kind of drawing these up. She's trying to figure out, or maybe they're rough drafts for the diary entries for the stories she's making up for them. Because we just came off Molly's death that we read through with the sea creature aspect of it, and I see the book in Edie's room, giant squids and other monsters, just little things like that. Maybe things she's reading. She's obviously a very creative person, and I think a lot of people in the Finch family have gone like this very creative, artistic route. Milton to a great extent, which we'll talk about as we go along. But these strike me as a lot of dreamers for the most part. People with just a very intelligent, probably also just wandering minds. And one thing I noticed was amongst all the books, also there are bird cages.
Yes.
For deceased birds, and I immediately was thinking to myself, all right, I've had 2 birds in my entire life, and when one passed, I just used the same cage for the next one. I cleaned it up, put some new stuff in it. It seems like each one, just like each house is, each bird is getting its own cage. And it just strikes me as someone that has a hard time coping with death, and someone that is very much intent on having something to memorialize people and animals. As we'll see when we take a trip through the cemetery later on in the game. She just strikes me as someone that has a lot of difficulty letting go. And unfortunately, she's in a family where she's had to let go of a lot of people. So I don't know kind of psychologically what that has done to her as far as pushing her to kind of sit down and write out these kind of various stories as you go along, which is what I contend still to this day.
It's kind of feel like this was the way that she was grieving. This is how she learned those grief.
Oh yeah,
her coping mechanism.
Oh yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So when you get done with Molly, she go into, I think it's Edie's bathroom, correct? This is all the pink one. And then you kind of look and you see this book that's on it. You listen to this poem, and then you find the secret. Edith uses her key, and then it goes on progressing into the next room. And you kind of find out that I think it's Uncle Walter, it was one of the brothers who who likes doing photography,
Oh, Sam. But there is a death in Edie's room. There is a memorial in Edie's room.
Her in the bathroom?
No, in her bedroom. You can look at a viewfinder.
And this is an easy one to
I don't remember that. Yes, it's very,
because it's in a corner and everything is on the other side of the room that's really drawing your attention. So I've missed it the first time around. Fortunately, the game is very kind about when you've concluded it, you can go through and kind of replay them. But yeah, it's an easy one to miss. It's an interesting one. And another thing about Edie that kind of tipped me off that she had a hard time of letting go of folks is Sven
Her husband
dies. Yes, Sven
Yes.
dies. This dragon sculpture he's making collapses basically, and he's killed. By the impact. I don't know if he was on it and he fell with it or if it fell on top of him. But what she tells the children, what she's telling everyone is just simply he was killed by a dragon, which is much more impressive than my husband built this faulty ass thing. It fell on him and he's dead. Instead, it's like, great grandpa Sven was killed by a dragon. And I think
knight in shining armor.
That's right. And I think that goes a long way into why we might be reading some of the things we read as we go along.
Did you look at the viewfinder this time on your most recent playthrough, you guys? Did y'all?
Oh yeah. It's basically Odin and his bringing the house over.
Yeah. Okay. So that I knew that I checked the viewfinder because it tells it kind of tells on how everything really originated and stuff and everything. So yeah, I did. I did that on my first time.
Detract from the photography question. I just was like, oh, we had a death there. There was one more.
But it is interesting with Odin, who he apparently this Finch curse has been going on for, I think they said 500 years, maybe a year,
yes, 500
centuries. And for some reason, Odin believes that it is the land they are on. And we don't get any more. That's all you get as far as the old country. But he is basically like, all right, we're going to uproot this house. We're taking this house, across the ocean. Makes it close. They're almost at shore. It's kind of capsized. Odin dies with it. The house is mostly collapsed. You can see a little bit of the old house later on throughout the game. We'll talk about that at the time. But yeah, it just kind of sets the tone, and then it continues here, which pretty much rules out that the curse was they can X that one out at that point.
And I looked up a little bit more about Odin, and apparently he wrote 2 novels. One is entitled The Mysteries of Death and Thereafter, and the other one is Joining the Great Majority. So those, I think, have some little hints to them.
Yeah.
But what kind of bothered me was how did he drown, yet his daughter, her husband, and baby Molly were okay?
Yeah.
Were they on a boat or something? Did they manage? I mean, what happened? How come only Odin is the one?
I am going to assume, I'm just going by, I referenced it again, and we'll talk about more in depth. His memorial in the cemetery kind of shows him atop a house, kind of, pointing to as if pointing the direction they're going. I assumed it was the captain goes down with the ship. The family is in the car. He is there on or, within the house. So that's why I assume, because I did notice also, it's like, well, that's bad luck, to be the only one to go down. But that's just what I picked up from his memorial there at the cemetery, his gravestone.
Do you have any comments about Odin, Ed? Oh, can you hear me okay? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, my Skype froze. I don't really have nothing to speak on about Odin. I just thought that, he kind of was the beginning of this family, and this is how everything just ended up being. Even when Edie talks about that time she was, she just visiting the sea, and then it felt like the sea split apart for her to go visit the old house.
Mm-hmm.
You know, which I thought that was kind of cool and everything, because she's just like, I got lost in the fog and everything, and it's just like, oh, okay. But I'm like, no, she was still alive after telling her story, because that leads once again close to the ending, which we'll get later. But we're gonna move on because we got to get into, I believe, is Sam's story is next.
Well, Calvin, but Calvin and Sam shared a bedroom because they were twins.
They were twins. Okay. And so this one, I believe, this is not the deer one. Is it a deer one?
Close. It's Calvin was into rocket ships and space, and when they have a really cool bedroom. I want to know.
They've got the best room.
How much money did this family have? But I guess if you have a father who can build damn near anything, you're gonna have a cool house.
Yeah.
Has a little loft that I think he calls it Mission Control. And you can go and see his memorial, and he has a little astronaut's helmet on, and Sam, his twin, wrote, I don't know if it's a poem or just a eulogy. I think it's just like a little essay about his brother. And then you go to his vignette, Calvin's, and he's on a swing, and he's wearing a cast on his leg. So I guess he's also accident prone. And you can see some of the family members' signatures on his cast.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so he's on the swing, and at first you can move just the analog stick and go back and forth, but then you got to move back of him on at the same time so that he swings higher, and he's telling the story, and it gets to a point where he swings over the tree, but the next swing that he goes through, he falls out, and so he actually is flying, but he falls into the sea and dies.
Now, anybody as a child that's tried to do a 360 on a swing set, it doesn't work.
Yes.
I have distinct memories of taking a nice hit to the back of the head, trying to go all the way across. So it's another one of those things. Where, given Calvin's interest in space and all that, I think he was another one that was kind of given what the family, and this is supposedly penned by his brother Sam, who would have been, I'm assuming, a child at that time. Also, I'm assuming Sam would have been young at the time he wrote this as well. Supposedly written by him, and I feel like it's more along the lines of what we saw with Molly. This is a swing set and why it's built right by the edge of a cliff, I don't know. It's that's rough too. That's not the best placement.
And it was weird that he was written not to listen to his mom to go and eat.
Yes. The mother does call them. Sam goes on in and leaves Calvin to it, which is also, all right, at this point in time, we're watching something that no one witnessed. No one saw the actual, Sam is in the house now, I assume, sitting down for dinner. Everyone is. So he's out of view when the rest of this happens. So we have no witnesses for, Calvin doing these 3 or 4 360s and then flying. So I don't know if it was one of those things that was as simple as just a mishap, a less dramatic form of what he was doing. Maybe he, just instead of doing a few, all the way arounds and flew through the air, it could have been as simple as just one big swing, and he came out of it and tumbled down the cliff. It could be a lot of things. At 11 years old, you don't want to say that if there was purposeful means behind him, his demise. You don't know what sent him off the cliff, but good and well it was not the method you're seeing. And the fact that there was no one there to witness it, I think it's just more of what we had with Molly. It's a nice way to kind of maybe cope with and memorialize someone with an extraordinary death. that otherwise had a maybe a dark, or at the very least just kind of a horrible accidental death.
And I think the swing is still there because you can look through the fence as Edith, and so it did. I thought maybe, okay, well, maybe the tree branch fell, but no, the swing is still intact. Maybe the cast is a hint that he's accident prone.
Oh yeah,
yes.
But his story is pretty short, and then after you have that little death scene, and by the way, none of these deaths are particularly morbid or gory in the game, which I appreciate. You don't really see anything too disgusting as you're playing. You don't really. I don't want to say no trigger warnings, but it's very tame. Their deaths are not. They're not taken to a horror movie level.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So I mean, you know that they're dying. There's some kind of idea of they're dying, but the visualization of it is not really there. You just have a heads up for it. Because the next one is Barbara. You go into her room. And it's so funny that you get that her name is Barbara, and she was like the scream queen. Like she had a particular scream, and it's so camp and it's so cliche for that to happen, because when you think of horror movies, you always think there's going to be a character designed just like her and everything. So you go into her room and you start reading this comic, and it's kind of like an interpretation on how she died. And it's very weird because it looks, and you guys probably haven't played this, but it looks like a Telltale adventure of The Walking Dead.
Yes. Yeah. This was probably the most unique, because each death has its own kind of gameplay mechanic or the way it's presented. This is definitely the one that kind of stands out, maybe besides Lewis later on. This is one that really stands out a lot to me as you're going. It's like an interactive comic all of a sudden as you're going kind of panel through panel, which I thought was just, and my hat's off to them again for just the way they present each one of these.
Absolutely beautiful.
It's very Tales of the Crypt.
Yes, that's like the little pumpkin head. He has this. I can't even do his voice. It's like as in the night.
Yeah.
And
it was very much like that kind of, the kind of feel you would get from like those old horror pulp comics. The ones kind of like big 50s and 60s. It's like a Tales from the Dark Side, as Ed said, Tales from the Crypt kind of thing. Like you would see nestled in like one of those horror anthologies or something like
Creep
that.
Show.
Yes, Creep Show. Yes. It's very similar format to that. Yes.
There was, I was watching Pushing Up Roses. She has a YouTube video about Edith Finch, and she made a really good point that she wonders if Barbara was named Barbara because of Night of the Living Dead with "They're coming to get you, Barbara."
Which could have been very well. I think they had a lot of purpose behind everything they did. But I guess Barbara was a child star. Eventually known as her unique scream she had. Looks like she did. You can see some of her works as you're in her room. It's kind of got old movie posters, old playbill magazines and whatnot about her films, and kind of looks like hit a little bit of hard times career-wise. I think they said she lost her scream kind of at some point. So now she's So now she's kind of just doing the routine everyday job thing. I think, was she in a diner? I believe, So you have to weigh that in, and you have to keep. One thing I kept into account is the kind of the tragic end a lot of child stars meet when you go from that childhood of fame to kind of getting out there in the real world, and that doesn't pan out well for a lot of them. But the way this is presented, and the first that Edie kind of making these a little more theatrical. Who contacted this magazine or this comic first to send this story, because she's already, touting the whole thing. Uh,
Oh, did we lose you there, Billy?
Hmm?
For a second, it cut out for a second, so I just
Oh,
Yeah.
Am I back?
Yes, we
Yes.
can
All
hear
right.
you.
So, with everything we've seen, I'm wondering all of a sudden if what I'm questioning the validity of what we're reading or what we're seeing played out here automatically with what we have already kind of seen and what I already suspect with these kind of fancied up a little bit.
Yeah. And Barbara's room has popcorn, her birthday cake, and burnt cigarettes.
And that cake's still sitting fine. It looks a little old, but I wouldn't have a slice of it. But it's certainly that is not a 50 years worth of neglect cake that is sitting there. And I toyed with the idea of maybe someone was bringing a new cake to the room on her birthday up till I guess it would be Edie, maybe up till the time Edie passed. But even if that's the case, we're still talking about 7-year-old cake sitting there. So it's hard to say. I did kind of give the cake a slight slide, just because I was like, all right, I rationalized maybe we're not dealing with a 50-year-old cake. Maybe it's 7. But then it's like, yeah, I still can't do much with that either. But I was very interested with hers. It kind of plays out like a horror film. And she is kind of maybe prepping maybe for a career comeback. She's getting back out there. I think it was a convention she was getting ready to go to, which is where like a lot of horror actors and actresses, they can still find work decades after their glory days at these conventions, just meeting fans and whatnot. But I believe Finn has an accident at some point in time, which it already all right. That's one accident. He's going to have another one with the dragon. This is an accident-prone family. This guy obviously could build some stuff, but he probably his safety precautions probably weren't up to snuff.
It was the saw. It was a table saw. I hurt his hand.
Hey, yes. That's rough. That's rough.
I think he still has his hand, but anytime I hear my neighbors with their buzz saws, I just I get really nervous.
Oh yeah, rightfully so. But it's yes. Go ahead.
Oh, so you kind of find out. Well, it's hinted at in the comment that they throw a surprise party for her. All these monsters that she has worked with, but then it really is that they're coming to eat her in the comic, and so she delivers her final screen, and then the police go and they think it's the boyfriend, but you're not really sure what happens, and you kind of find out that the little brother, I think it was Calvin, was hiding under the bed.
Walter.
Okay. I keep getting the boys' names wrong.
There's so many boys, but Billy has really good theories about this one.
I don't know. Because all right, what you're presented is the boyfriend disappears. There's talk on the radio of there being a killer out there on the loose. A very cliched type thing. But it's not that in the end it is what looks like a surprise party. She finds out all the guests are monsters though, that I guess consume her. You're not given more than that. So automatically you know that this was not the actual cause of death. I don't think there was a pack of monsters in the house. And it was said that Walter was there and he kind of, witnessed whatever occurred, or at least heard whatever occurred. And it leads to his story, which we'll get to next. And I was of a couple of minds about it. I was like, all right, it's definitely, I'm of 3 minds about it. I've gone through 3 different ways of thinking about it. One, the simple way through it is that the boyfriend did it. How often in movies does that occur? Because the boyfriend wasn't found. I was like, all right, that's cut and dry. And then I'm kind of thinking about it again, and I'm thinking about it from the former child star perspective, how a lot of them have trouble, reacclimating, how a lot of those lives end young and they end, by shitty means. And I'm sitting there kind of thinking, she's prepping to go back into this thing. There's got to be a lot of anxiety with that. There's got to be a lot of doubt with that. Um, Succumbing to these monsters at the end, these things, it's succumbing to our own personal monsters and demons and whatnot. And and I also. And I'm going to take you down a wild road here. This is the road less traveled. This one's not even paved. Doesn't even have gravel down on it. It's all dirt. There's one little bit, and I'm a big horror movie guy. Always have been. Where they play, I believe the song, I think is Tubular Bells or something like it. It's all commonly known as a Halloween thing. It's on a similar.
It's the theme from a Halloween. Yeah, it's the theme from Halloween.
It's the theme from Halloween. You say that, everyone can kind of hear that. Whether you've watched the movies or not, you've probably heard that theme. And that's used in the game. And it's kind of used as the killer is kind of, well, I think you do the point of view of whoever's after her for a brief moment, I believe. And you get the theme. And much like in the game Halloween, she's there with the boyfriend. The boyfriend leaves, and then Barbara dies. In the movie Halloween, it's similar. The sister is there with the boyfriend. Boyfriend takes off. The sister is killed with the theme music and all. And the sister is killed by her little brother, Michael Myers, in the film. And considering her little brother Walter is in the house, Walter's seeing all this, supposedly it's gone on, and it's led, as we'll see, Walter into the situation he is in when we hear his story. It's loose. It's loose. I won't fight about it. I won't come to blows over it. I can't rule out that Walter hasn't had some involvement in that death. I can't imagine they're throwing that particular, of all the horror themes, of all the little generic jingles you could throw in there. You're throwing in one where the older sister, after spending time with her boyfriend, is killed by the younger brother, and now you're putting this in here where the three characters in the house are the older sister, the boyfriend, and the younger brother. You're setting up the same dynamic. And I thought that it was just, if nothing else, they probably want you to maybe think about it, maybe talk about it. I thought it was something that couldn't be denied, though. All I know is that it was not a pack of monsters. And I think it's another thing, whether it is Edie once again trying to, fancy up this, like whether it's a brutal murder by the boyfriend, and she just kind of wants to drum up something to put out there. I don't think any of it's with ill intent. I think it's much better, to have this incredible story, memorial.
Oh, did we lose Billy?
Oh no!
Again?
It cuts out in and out a little bit.
Oh. Horrible. But yeah, I don't know if it's just one of those things where it's a lot better, fiction being better than reality. Whether it was, she was killed by the boyfriend, whether this was her own personal struggle, or whether it's covering for young Walter, whatever it might be. I have to believe this was another kind of Edie manufactured story.
We do notice that. So in the comic book, they say that the hook man, the killer, falls through the banister upstairs. And when you're playing as Edith Finch, you actually do see where it was repaired. So did Walter accidentally or purposely push his sister from the stairs? I don't know. Did she accidentally fall on some skates like the killer does in the comic book?
Who knows?
It's worth noting. Another thing is, while you're playing through Barbara's part, there's a part where the boyfriend, you assume the boyfriend is or someone is in the house and she's hearing a noise, and it turns out being the boyfriend, just playing a prank on her at the time. But he springs out from this refrigerator, and it's worth noting about that refrigerator, because you'll get a key to get down to the basement. You learn throughout Barbara's story that there's a music box. You turn it and it plays music. You keep turning it and the handle will come off and it has a key to the basement.
Yes.
And that is how we're going to traverse down to the younger brother that was in the house at the time of Barbara's death, Walter. We're going to get down to his story. But to get there, we have to go through the refrigerator that the boyfriend jumped out of.
Before we get there,
yes.
If you explore the house first and you do the music box, you find out that Sven built it. You can't take the key out. You know nothing about that until
not yet. When you first touch it, you can't do anything with it.
Yeah.
Yes. So when you actually find out how to get downstairs, that's when you could go, because you can actually play with the pool table if you want to, like align the pool balls. Yeah,
you can.
Yep, it's a trophy in the PlayStation 4 version.
You can hit them with the stick?
I think you can't hit them with the sticks, but I think you can align the balls together.
Oh, and the little triangle.
Yeah, thing? So there's a way that you can interact with the pool thing, and then you go and when you get to the refrigerator, then we get into Walter's story, and Edith is kind of upset because the mom never told her about this.
Yeah.
And she remembers Edie would bring these cases downstairs.
Yes. And so we get into Walter's room and we get to start his story. So now, Billy, go ahead.
All right, and the one thing I noticed was the refrigerator that the boyfriend sprung out of, apparently is a secret, yet another secret compartment. And you go through there and you start heading down, and you are now underground, underneath the house. And you notice all these, Walter, you went through his room very briefly at the beginning to get to Molly's room. Walter's room was empty. You just had the walls were painted. One thing worth noting on Walter's wall, you had the train car mural built there. And that's a theme with him. As you get down there, you'll see he did have little like train parts he was working on and all that. And when you're able to flash back to his room as Barbara, in the previous one, you'll see he had like a full train bed, all kinds of things like that. That makes sense as or doesn't make sense, one or the other, as we proceed on. And I love the way they tell his story. He, after what happened with Barbara, is so either by what he saw or heard or what he did, is so incredibly distraught that either by his own choice or maybe by Edie's, kind of push, is now residing underneath the house in this little kind of survival bunker. And it's fully stocked. Obviously, Edie is making drops there on the regular, as I said. And I love the way they tell that story and just how much time passed. It is depressing, as he's just opening these canned peaches and the little calendar on the wall. His actions never change. And he talks about, the only way he's gotten through this is just kind of develop a routine. There is a rumbling that comes through every day that he is convinced is a monster. He thinks it's the same monster that killed Barbara. So he's not moving. He's not budging from this bunker. And it's just this guy going through his routine as you see the calendar, just dropping off decade by decade. I think we start in the 60s and and we conclude in 2005. So I mean, he's put about a good 40 years down there when he decides it's time to the noise has stopped. So he's kind of gotten to that point now where it's like, all right, it's now or never. I've been down here this long, whatever happens to me, it's going to be better than staying cooped up down here. And and of course nothing good happens.
And,
yeah.
And
go ahead.
He has it all set up. I mean, he has a bathroom and everything if you look at all the details. And I did notice, I don't know if he did this or Edie, there's a window with this pretty outdoor scene. I don't know if that's to help him get some sun, to help him think that he's actually looking outside. But it is set up like a train car, isn't it?
It is. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And so he gets to, he's ready to go live his life. He finds this hammer. He knocks down the wall and he steps out and he is in this underground passageway of railroad. And, he's going to walk out and try to go and live his life. And the game forces you to get on the rail track. And as you look up, you see lights coming, you hear the train, and that's the end of his story. Walter dies by getting ran over by a train. That was the fear. As time passed, as you get back to the present time, you see the train track cut off. So that whole part that was connected to it is not there anymore.
Yes. And his speech while he's talking about how he doesn't care if he has 1 year, 1 month, 1 week, even 1 day. It's very poignant as he's talking about how he can't continue living that way.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, and then the tragic demise. And why did he just climb back upstairs? Who gave him the sledgehammer? Was he going to go possibly murder someone else? Upstairs?
My assumption is that it was already downstairs and he probably grabbed it and put it. But it's more of a funny, ironic story. Cause it I don't know if anyone has watched Crank. I think it's Crank. Or it might be in Crank 2. One of the characters from the first movie is at a therapy section. And he was just like, I'm going to live my best life and I'm going to sleep with all this women. I'm going to eat all of this food and I'm going to do all of this stuff. And the moment he steps out the door, he gets shot and get killed.
Oh.
And it's supposed to be where the ironic, and it's supposed to be satire, playing satire, is that people who always feel like they waited so long to live their life, now that they finally decided to live it, it's over. So, with what? Oh, go ahead.
And it should be mentioned that you don't see this train. That he's looking up. You see the light, you hear the noise. It's also worth mentioning that the trees don't move any more than they already are. You would think a train passing through would kind of, right there next to the trees would kind of, send a little wave through them. They're still just kind of gently blowing as this happens. So it's hard to say whether a legitimate train ran through there. He's already said at this point he's stepping out because he hasn't heard it in a while. So and there's also, I think, a newspaper. There's something that alluded to the fact that there were kind of like a earthquake, something destroyed part of the track at some point.
And didn't he have like a radio with him?
He listened to music, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
Okay, because I was just like, why did he have a clock also to write down the times when he's hearing these noise, so that when he's going to live his life, he kind of knows that I know that this thing happens at this time, so I'm going to wait for it after it happens, and it leaves. Then I'm going to go out and live my life.
Yeah, because the train would have. The train would have a regular, like it's like, oh, this happens at 1 p.m. every day. Well, I think I'm going to go out about 5 o'clock this evening. I guess he got into such a sense of relief that, kind of a week went by without anything. And I don't know if it's something where, if the train was there, whether it's something where the train was down for repair, and he just had the awful luck of stepping out there the day it was fixed back up. I wonder why there's that's the worst location for a train, running under a house on a sheer cliff top. But
to where?
As Edith, I made it my main mission this time when I played through, to see how much of that track I could see. It won't let you walk into the tunnel at all. You don't get anything from that. And as Edith, you go down into the bunker, and you kind of retrace the steps. You walk out on that train track also. There's a neat little kind of makeshift memorial right there on the spot, which is an easy to miss detail. But you walk that also. And I was like, all right, I'm going to see what I can see. I did see a little bit of track that goes, bewilderingly enough, it doesn't look like there's enough room for a train. And what I was thinking was more along the lines of like the train carts, like the little rail carts. I didn't see a track big enough. Yeah, I didn't see a track big enough for a train to kind of get there. And I don't think a train is going to travel. I'm not here for my train expertise, but I don't think it's going to travel right there on the side of a mountain. And I don't think it's going to run underneath the house. Who knows? But that goes to, I don't know what the noise he heard was, if it was anything. But you have to keep in mind, this was obviously someone that was fascinated with trains also. From the time he was a child, he had the train bed. He had the train mural on his wall.
Yes.
It could be a similar situation to Molly, where Edie kind of took the things they loved in life, and kind of incorporated those into the stories they're passing. It could have very well been he got out of there, he stepped out, had a heart attack and dropped right there on the spot.
Oh.
But it's much more touching. And kind of much more dramatic, in keeping with the theme of these simple deaths, whether it's falling out of a swing or eating poisonous berries. It's always better to remember them with these kind of fantastic endings.
Yes.
It's just hard to say. I just can't see that being a location where a functional train is running. I don't know. It could be one, because, like I said, the big thing with Edith was I wanted to see if the track was there to begin with.
Yeah.
And then we get through, and I'll talk more about that at the end. Why, even though Edith is out there with the track, why that really doesn't help the train argument. More as we go along. But I don't know. I'm kind of inconclusive on that one. I could just see that being one of the things where, with the fascination with trains he had, Edie would find that as a kind of a fitting way to put something out there for him as far as his demise, which then again maybe makes it easier for her to cope with the fact that he's been down there all that time, didn't really get to live a life, and then he comes out and dies by whatever means.
Yes.
Did y'all notice that when you're playing as Edith, the electricity is still on down in his bunker?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's in the bunker, and there are a couple of other little spots, if I'm not mistaken, where it is where it's on. So I don't know. Even if it was on a generator, that's a hell of a generator.
Right,
going,
because I was just
going
like,
7 years strong.
Because I was just like, there are some parts in this that's like, okay, she didn't cut the electricity on, but there are some parts that have electricity. That, like, some of the lighting stuff, I'm like, that doesn't make sense. But
very forgiving utility company.
Yes.
Exactly. So Edith comes out of there, and then she goes down closer to where the beach is at. And then she continues to go up, And I believe it's the next part is when she looks at this telescope. I believe that's the next part.
That
You
or
take a little,
Terry?
you take a, yeah, and on the way, Edith drops a couple of lines that I think she alludes more to the curse and the
Hmm.
stories, and she basically says that she's worried. I think the quote is worried that stories themselves might be the problem, and another time she thinks it's one of those things where she believes. Everyone believes so much in the family curse that they've made it real, that they've kind of given it more weight, since everyone is so entangled with it, and believe the stories of the curse and believe the stories that they're reading that may or may not be fabricated. And
Okay.
there is something to that. I think we've all had instances where we are so concerned about something, or we've kind of talked ourselves to the point of worrying about something bad that it
Mhm.
happens. I don't know the phenomenon to that, but it certainly is a thing. It's one of I don't know if it's just made the family more cautious to the point of they slip up, in some instances, or what it is, or if it's kind of instilled a sense of hopelessness in them. If you know your days are numbered, you're not going to be as cautious as
And
some of us that hope to live long lives.
and everybody who dies in the family is buried by the house.
Hmm. Hmm.
So it's just like you would think that if they passed away, they would be buried somewhere in the cemetery. Nope. They are always coming back to the house in some form or fashion. It just happened to be dead.
And what's funny is at the very beginning, if you go
Hmm.
up to the library, Edith says how Edie told her all of the deceased Finches are buried in the library, which sounds, I don't know if that's a metaphor,
Mm.
but we do see their gravestones, their headstones behind the house
Hmm.
Hmm.
by the
Yes.
telescope.
Yeah.
The telescope shows you the old house, I believe,
Yes.
which has a red light constantly blinking.
It's made it, and it's very a sinister type look to it. And I also, if you want to go down the route that there is some supernatural curse, it very much seems like kind of a threatening, sinister, and with the red light blinking, almost like a heartbeat to the old house there. Like whatever evil traveled along with that house, is kind of still there. I know some people subscribe to the more kind of paranormal, legitimate, kind of curse aspect to it. But I could definitely see, um, more than just kind of a beacon out there, that's put there to maybe warn people, don't, bring your ship over here, you're gonna run over a house. It does seem, when you look at it, I think it's presented, and just every time you see it up to that point, you catch like little glimpses of something off in the ocean. And it's always, it carries like a kind of an ominous type look to it, which I have to imagine was on purpose. And if you want to go down the route that this is a curse that is of some kind of supernatural means, and maybe the former house was involved, you would look at the fact that they use some parts of the old house to construct the new one. Maybe if you're going with that curse, they said, they all the bricks from the old house they've used for the fireplace. I think there are a couple other instances. It would suggest that maybe whatever it is living on in this new house. That's if you want to go down that route.
Wow, that's
Mm.
that's a really good outlook on it.
Mm-hmm. But you see it, and it's just a red light, and just kind of a heartbeat rhythm to it. I can't say that that's really the way I go with things, but I don't dismiss it when someone brings up something along those lines.
Yeah, it seems kind of depressing too that it's a reminder of this is how your father passed away. And it's
Hmm.
constantly in the back. I mean, even Sam has his second wedding on the beach. So was that house in the background
Mm.
during his
Mm.
wedding?
Yes.
Yeah.
So the next is Gregory's. It's not Gregory's the ones that's next, right? After you.
I think it is. I do want to talk about the cemetery real quick, if that's okay.
Yes, go ahead.
So there's a pet cemetery, not Stephen King type pet cemetery, but there is a cemetery for some pets. There's a cemetery for the deceased family members, and there are loving details on these headstones. Like for Molly, there's a little cat with angel wings, which is absolutely precious. For Walter's, like I mentioned to you guys in our conversation, I didn't notice this the first time around. I thought it was just this rock, but if you get closer to it, it's like this little diorama where he's standing on the beach looking out. So I don't know if that's supposed to symbolize his freedom, hope, his release from the shackles of his tortured mind, perhaps. But did you guys Edie's grave, which this with the timeline, it's kind of interesting that it has a headstone over there. There's a book with a bunch of letters, which kind of adds a little bit more glue and solidity to her fabricating stories. She seems like a master with words and creativity.
And also the way the words are floating around, the way that some dialogue is put throughout the game, there's tremendous. I love the way they do it with the letters in this. Sometimes sentences will actually physically appear. And you can kind of manipulate them, like walk through them. There's one part out on the beach with the kite later on, where you're flying it literally through them. And this is, once again, the gameplay is with Edith is not real time. It's just what she has written down. And I kind of took that to be that the letters swirl around a lot like Edie's headstone with the book with the letters kind of that this in and of itself was kind of inspired by that. The story we're hearing from Edith here has her touches throughout. Maybe it's a Edith's own way of kind of a continuation, because these stories, these passings, she's passing along herself to the person that is reading it. So I thought it was interesting that the way we've seen the words kind of bouncing around the entire game are similar to what's on Edie's memorial there. So it's because it always feels like, even though she's been deceased, I believe, 7 years at this point, it feels like she is still pulling the strings throughout the game that we're playing through here. That she's kind of an omnipresent force throughout.
Were there any other gravestones you guys thought were?
I thought it was the neatest thing. The little pet area. Went through some pets and weren't very creative with names either. But Milton, it's worth stating, is the only one that does not have a body. We'll get more on his story, but it's said that he wasn't found. So his was there, not kind of to celebrate his death or anything like that. It was just there to remember him, not to mourn him at Milton's. It's the only one that I guess does not have a body in it. And of course, everyone else's, it's things that they enjoyed. Sven, I believe, has a saw and some other, kind of workshop tools at his. Calvin has his rocket and things like that. So I thought they were all very appropriate. And I think goes with kind of the painstaking detail kind of Edie puts into memorializing these relatives that have passed.
I think the next death actually Sam, because during this journey you find out something about Edith that you might not have realized at the beginning. She is 22 weeks pregnant.
Yes.
She mentions how she's very precarious too. She takes some pretty dangerous methods. Climbing on tree branches. I'm not pregnant, and I wouldn't be climbing on tree branches.
Right. Because it looked like, I think you could see her shadow, but it looked like she wasn't pregnant when you see her shadow.
Yeah, it's not huge. It's not a huge belly yet.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that is a thing, and it goes back to where maybe the fact that they believe in these stories and this curse factors into just the way they live their life. I think that these are people that don't think they're going to be around. Even though at this point in time she has a little more than kind of her own life to worry about. But in general, I think it's just led to these people being a little more reckless because they know that time's up pretty soon. They don't have to worry about preserving themselves to an old age.
So that's what is the next one. Was it Gregory's?
It's actually Sam, because I thought it was Gregory too, but but then I was thinking as you traverse along the beach and you climb the tree branches, which is around where Molly as a cat was chasing that bird, and then you get onto this deck and you climb a ladder, and it's Sam's room, because I started remembering all of the military paraphernalia. Because he joined the military when he was 18, but the timeline, I think it was 1968, so he would have served in Vietnam.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So his is the next one. And like you were saying, he was a big photographer.
Yes.
Yes.
So, oh gosh, who wants to start off this one? This one's so
okay. So Sam is taking. Sam has his daughter, and they're going on a hunting trip. He's teaching his daughter how to shoot. But while he's doing it, he's making memories of taking this picture. And the daughter kind of doesn't really want to be there, but she's doing it for him and everything. And so you go out, and I think this is from the first marriage, I think. The
daughter's Dawn, who's actually Edith's mom. The Dawn is a teenager, I guess, at this time.
Okay.
Hunting, and he would have been married to his second wife by now. We'll get into the first wife in a little bit. So it's her, but it's just Dawn and Sam. The stepmom's not there. Her siblings are not there. But that is a really cool vignette, because no two people are going to have the same photos. You are actually taking the photos, and you can take them of whatever you like. It's a really cheeky one where Sam is actually out by the tree, and you're playing with Dawn, and you can take a picture of your dad using the restroom.
Yeah, and there are only certain pictures that will progress the story along.
Yes.
But yeah, I did love that you could and with most things in this game, you can take your time. And yeah, there are a lot of pictures you can take and get like maybe a little bit of alternate dialogue here and there. So I did like the way that was done. And the first time I played this, I had the hardest time. There was one particular, I think, where you first encounter the deer. You have to zoom in with the camera. I had the hardest time finding that thing. And I just remember taking pictures of absolutely everything. Because you have to get it just focused just right. And lined up just right for the story to move along. But I thought that was, once again, just a very neat way of presenting the story and kind of a unique kind of gameplay mechanic as you went along.
Yes. And then when you see the deer, Sam is very eager to kill it, and he wants Dawn to do it. He wants to teach. He keeps emphasizing throughout this story, I want to teach you survival skills. If you ever need them, I want you to be able to take care of yourself. So he has her, this is really neat. He's taking her picture where she's aiming the gun. And when you take it just right, you hear the gunshot.
Yeah.
And see the deer's on this cliff or something. And Dawn is beside herself. She is not happy that she has killed Bambi.
Pretty much, yes. And so then they go up. Walter is going into to see if the deer is dead and stuff, and she's telling him no, not Walter, Sam, I'm sorry, she's telling Sam that, hey, it looks like it's still twitching, and Sam just like doesn't pay attention to it. And the last picture it shows of the deer breaking up with Sam about to fall off the cliff. So he's dying in the same way that his brother died.
Yes.
Yeah. That's definitely worth mentioning. And it's also worth mentioning at this point in time, this was like one of the most kind of crazy deaths. I mean, just the circumstances are, but there wasn't anything in this one you could really pick apart, which I think was interesting because this is the first death that had a witness to it.
Yes.
Dawn was there, and Dawn, as we will see throughout, isn't playing with these games. She is not a big fan of these stories that her grandmother, Edie, is spinning. She's not a fan of these yarns. So the first death we have that you see, and it's like that's bad luck. That is very awful circumstances that everything lined up just right. But it's not out of the question. It's not something we could sit here and debate. And the fact that that is the first death that has a witness to it.
That's a good point. And this, even as a young girl, we see that Dawn is kind of the voice of reason. She's trying to warn her dad.
Yes.
Dad, ear is still twitching. And he's like, oh, no, that's normal. That's normal.
Yeah. She's the one I feel like kind of defies, she's one, she's a diamond in the rough there in that family. As far as I think she's the one that doesn't let this curse define her. She's aware of it. And I think she can see how crazy everyone else in her family is acting, and just kind of how haphazard everyone is. And she is very much a voice of reason that goes unlistened to throughout the game, apparently.
Yes, and we do learn through exploring her room and her loft that she turned to religion later for comfort, which, I mean, with all those circumstances, I'd be looking for a lot of answers myself.
Yeah. But it's the thing that's what she turned to rather than turning to, the stories and the curses and everything, all the things that Edie has fabricated. She's kind of rejected, and she's trying to understand what's going on and cope with what's going on in a different means.
Yes. Which, I mean, some people might argue, oh, that's fantastical too, but at least with whatever, she's finding something that multiple people practice, multiple people find comfort in. It's way more grounded than these fantasy stories that her grandmother
is telling.
With yes.
So,
Ed, we're about to get to the one that you were talking about.
So, in the same room, as she continued to walk by, you pick up and you see the story about Sam getting a divorce, and it tells the story of their 1-year-old Gregory. And you kind of find out that he is in this bathtub, and Sam is narrating the whole thing. He's trying to figure out, the mom, instead of just still denying the phone to pick Gregory out and put him out, she hears a phone call because she says, Gregory's time to get out the bath. And she hears a phone call and she goes and answers it.
Who does that? And this was one of those, because when you see the memorial, when you go over, what's happening. You know the end of this character. So it was a real shock, because I mean, kids have already dropped off in this. Small kids by that means. 10-year-old and whatnot. But when you see that, it's like, oh, so I don't want to do this one. But at the same time, it's like, all right, for the sake of completing this story, which we still are trying to piece together, I guess I need to see what's going on. But it's one of those that it's just, you dread it from the second it comes on. And I did. And this one's presented in just the saddest fashion.
And Sam presents it almost like Edie, where he's telling this magical story, and he's telling it, he's telling it to us as the player, but he's really speaking it to his wife and everything about it, trying to comfort. And it's just like, okay, yes, it is doing this magical thing, and it has this great classic and I cannot think of what the piece is. Is that?
It
But
is the Waltz of the Flowers.
Look
okay,
at that.
okay, and
I
so and so you're knocking stuff into the bathtub,
Mm,
and at one point you take all the water out, and it's
mhm,
just like, okay, air all the toys is on the ground, but then you end up plugging the bathtub again,
mhm,
and you control, I believe, a frog,
mhm,
and it gets in and it hits the handle, and the bathtub starts filling up with water.
mhm.
And because there's no one there to stop it, and you cannot stop it, there's no
You're
way for you to stop. You end up seeing the end of Gregory, and it goes back to where Sam is, telling his ex-wife, you know, the story of how he thinks how their child died, and the divorce kind of happens because of the death
Mhm.
of Gregory,
and that's
as you can see.
that's a common thing that happens after a child
Oh
passes away.
yeah.
Actually, the parents split up,
Mhm,
and it's the way they handle Gregory's death is beautiful. I'm not
mhm,
going to deny it, especially because uh, they show him as hallucinating or imagining himself as the frog because you see
mhm,
little green hands appear
mhm.
swimming under the water, swimming
Hmm.
towards the drain. And oh, like Billy said, the second I was sitting in the tub as a baby, my heart dropped.
Yeah, yeah. But
Oh.
it's one of those. I'm sure it's something that has occurred. So
Hmm.
it's not something, and like Ed pointed out, and a great catch on that. Sam is doing his own version, and I think you're seeing with him a practical application of what Edie's doing. For herself and the rest of the family. He's trying to comfort even though they're in the midst of this divorce, he's still from one human to another, is still trying to present this horrible and yes, slightly negligent death. He's trying to comfort her and help her get through that by presenting it in a kind of more fantasy world, kind of for what it was, happier type way, which I think is definitely something that was probably passed down to him.
Hmm.
Um, so that is definitely something, and I think Sam was the one that pinned also the thing from Calvin. So Sam also has obviously inherited Edie's kind of way with words and way with kind of taking these awful situations and um, putting this kind of magical spin on them to ease the pain of everyone there.
And I don't, I don't think they're getting a divorce at the time Gregory is alive, but he keeps calling, and Kay
Yeah,
sounds very
yeah.
frustrated. So
There's
I don't know.
obviously an argument, and there was probably a lot of blame back and forth. And I know when a child passes, kind of both parents
Hmm.
find their own way of coping, and a lot of times that's in opposite directions. So that's
So,
that's
Yeah.
I think they probably was separated at
hmm
that time, and then while she is mad at Sam, you know, the guilt she probably feel, or the blame she kind of feels like, you kept me on on the
hmm
phone instead of
hmm
attending to our child, and
hmm
because of cause you did cause A, which affected me as
hmm
B. This is what happened. It ended up being C, where you was on the phone talking to me, arguing about something that wasn't probably important, and because of that, the responsibility that I had for our child got neglected, and
hmm
that neglect ended up killing our child. So, you know, and that guilt, that grief that the wife had to do is stuff, because we don't know what happened to the wife after
hmm
uh
She
they got
escaped
the
the
divorce.
madhouse.
Yes.
Yes.
That's what she did.
So
She, that's a great point. I can imagine arguments that ensued after that
Mhm.
poor baby's death. But they do handle it very tastefully, and there is a
Yeah.
trophy. There is a trophy if you knock all of Gregory's magnetic letters spelling his name in the
Mhm.
Yes.
bathtub. If you knock them off, it's so, oh man. And I don't know how Dawn stayed in that around that room because they kept his crib, and Sam keeps saying, "Oh, our baby was so happy." And you can even see in Gregory's pictures just the
Mhm.
cutest thing, so smiling all the time.
Mhm.
And so it's Gregory's crib, then it's Dawn's old bed, and then it's Gus's bed and Gus's memorial. Gus is
Yes.
the
I
second
do
son.
wonder
Mhm.
though, was Gregory walking?
At one, I don't know. I don't have any kids, so Billy,
They're
do you
they're
have
up,
any?
they're up and about. They're up on their feet at that point in time.
Because
Usually.
because it seemed to be that he cut on the water and let the water continue to come up, and he ended up drowning himself. That is
Yes.
the idea of it.
The reality instead of a frog doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah, because I can't imagine throwing, even if he's in there throwing toys. That's just it's a lot of lucky shots or unlucky shots to plug the tub and manage to turn the faucet on also. So it is conceivable that he got up and accidentally cut the tub on, messing around with it and whatnot,
Mhm.
and couldn't get out, or just played in the, or maybe he wanted the water. At 1 year old, I just had one here at the house, and he loves jumping in the tub, like that's his favorite time. So it's perfectly conceivable the water gets drained and he's not done. He wants it back on, and he's seen how to cut it on. So it's hard to say, but definitely I can't see it being the way it's presented, which is the point of what Sam is writing. Because sometimes I think it's easier. He's learned probably from his time at that house. It's easier to accept these kind of stories than it is to just the stark reality of it.
Oh, I hope the
Yes.
water wasn't too hot either. That just occurred to me that oh, we better move on because I'm gonna start
Moving on.
crying during
So,
this.
moving on is you continue to search through the house, because it's not Milton yet.
Gus.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's Gus.
And I
And
have to
Gus,
say, I think his is the most forgettable. I hate to say it like that.
Oh man, yeah. There is nothing. It's cut and dry. I don't think even I love the way it's presented. That's kind of neat. But the as far as the story goes, there's not a lot there, and you can tell. You're in and out of that scenario,
because
really
this is the
quickly.
kite. This is him outside with
Mhm.
the marriage, and he's in a kite, and he flicks
He flicks his dad off.
he
Yes.
flicks his dad
Yeah.
off,
This
and
is not a wedding that he is happy to be at. So he's decided, instead of attending, he's hanging out on the beach for the evening, just flying his kite around.
yes, and
Yes, he's
so
like 13 or something.
Hmm.
So you move the kite around with different words and everything, all the sentences that's coming, and then soon it starts getting out of control, and the kite starts collecting all of this debris,
Hmm.
and the last thing you collect is the tent that the people have moved into, and everything is dancing around you, and then it ends up hitting you, and it blacks out, and you end. So pretty much, it looks like that he got killed by playing his kite. Maybe he would have got electrocuted. Maybe a tree fell or something. He got connected, but he ends up dying in a way that I kind of, like you guys, kind of felt like I didn't care about this one. In a way, kind of felt deserved
Hmm.
because of him just being so, not disrespectful, but being
It's very obstinate.
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
uh
Defiant a little bit.
defiant, yeah,
Hmm.
defiant. I was about to, it starts with an R, and I cannot think about it. I don't know
Like
why.
recalcitrant?
Um, rebellious. I'm sorry.
Rebellious. Oh, yes.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah. He's at the perfect age for that. And he has his little
Yeah.
Yeah,
mohawk and his spiked
Yes.
bracelets.
You can tell
yeah.
he's trouble. He's,
Yeah.
but I did also. It's one of those. It's a forgettable one. I think none of them I think are made for filler. Just to pad it out. This is definitely the one where I don't think there was much to it. They just had this family member. We need to come up with a way, to knock them off. But yeah, it does show, and I don't know the passage of time. Obviously it's getting darker, and I don't know, but there's a storm also, so it's hard to say what time has passed because you're told, the wedding's on the beach, then it moves to the tent, but then he's killed by the tent, supposedly that picks up in the storm, and kind of mows him down. But there's no one in there. So I don't know if it's one of those things where it's like Ed's saying, maybe he got hit by lightning, maybe one of many other things, or maybe it was just he was out there even after everyone came and went. And times passed that it doesn't look like it has to us. You kind of get jumps here and there. But that last part between when they go in the tent and when it hits him, I can't tell if any time has passed or not. It would be the only one that I would have like any kind of slight complaint about. It doesn't do a good job of conveying the passage of time. Like, okay, wedding's over, everyone's gone away, he's still refusing. He's going to sit there on the beach all night. But at the same time, if there's a storm like that, you think you're gonna round the kids up. You're gonna do a little head count. And they said that everyone was so caught up in the celebrating that they forgot about. I don't know. And once again you get kind of the themes of the negligence in there, which this is about the third or fourth instance of it. And in him and Gus himself, you kind of get the kind of that sense of. They have this weird indestructible sense for people that are scared of this curse that's going to take them down. That I think it gives them like this kind of indestructible sense to them. They're just going to do what they want to do. I'm going to swing over here by this cliffside. I'm going to fly my kite during this what looked like hurricane. So it's hard to say. He definitely met his demise out there in that storm, whether it's because a tent picked up and hit him or not. That's up for debate, but it's not one I debate too much. That was definitely one of those I was kind of in and out of.
I think it was the totem pole. I think it was the family totem, because when you're playing as Edith and you're on that beach area, you notice it is no longer tall. There are different pieces fallen and strewn about. Yeah. And I think they do show the tent, of course, hitting him in that vignette.
Yeah.
But I think they kind of allude to the totem pole falling, possibly. But I wonder if his death was so forgettable on purpose because it's like middle child syndrome. He's the middle child. I don't know. I'm reading too deeply into this.
That may be.
That may be because I think for him it was just like we need filler so we could get to the next one. Or something, or to expand the story to it, because he didn't really there was no interest in him to what he contributed to the family, or if he had mental problems or something. He looked like he was just a normal rambunctious kid, and he just died.
I know. I don't know. He looked like I would have liked to explore his story more. He seemed pretty interesting, but I think he kind of made himself a recluse on purpose.
Yeah.
I mean, you remember what it was like when you were 13. Gosh, all the emotions.
Yeah, and especially with a parent taking on a new step parent and things like that. I could definitely see that being a thing. Yes.
Well, everybody, we're going to take a quick break and we're going to come right back and we're going to get into the last part of it, and we'll be right back.
Oh, very smooth, guys. Thank you. My girlfriend forgot something. I have to run it out to her. Oh. If I possibly could. I guess she's juggling like 3 kids out there. So hold on just one moment.
Oh, no problem. Okay, let me put at about, we take a break around the 2 hour.
Like 1:55 or something.
Okay. This is such a good game. My goodness. All kind of good points being
made. Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. Let's
see. Because who's next? Is it Milton's next?
It is. Then you go upstairs and you see Dawn's area where she meets her husband. I think it is Milton. Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so it's Milton. Because then after it is Calvin's when he's at the fish factory.
Lewis.
It is?
Yeah, Calvin is the one who was on the swing.
Oh, that is right.
I know there's so many names. There are so many names.
And I was trying to write everything down. It's just like, oh, why did I not get?
There are so many names. It's very easy to Let's see. Oh, right. That was very fast. And then
she had half the stuff by the door. It's the 1-year-old's birthday party thing later today. So it's her sister's child. So we're
thank you for taking time. I'm sorry, I didn't realize.
Oh, it's not till it got me out of a lot of moving furniture around, so that's nice. It's not until like 4 p.m. today or something like that. So
okay.
It is much later.
Break and
okay.
All right, you want to? We are back, everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So here we go. And welcome back, everybody, to our Boss Rush Book Club panel special edition of What Remains of Edith Finch. I am joined once again by Celeste Roberts and by Billie Holiday. We're going to continue on because we're getting close to the end. Mm-hmm. And so the next person that we meet is Milton's story. And this was so cool. What I liked about it was a little flip book. Mm-hmm. And all you do is just like hold the directional thing and everything just flips. And you see the animation. You see that he was into art and drawing. And when you're looking at the book, he draws this door. And he walks to the door and it ends. So there is no idea of did he just run away from the house and never to be seen? And what made him do that? We have no idea. At first, Milton is kind of the main plot of the game. You're trying to find out what happened to him, but everybody has all of these stories that you learn of their disappearance or their death. And so when it comes to Milton, you kind of actually get the idea of, okay, I'm at the final thing. What is going on? Oh, he just disappeared.
I'm gonna preface that with after just in case people are because it's like there's so many people in this dang house. So after you do Gus's, you go upstairs and there's a little loft and it's actually like a little military looking rock wall climbing thing. You climb up. There's Dawn's little loft that she lives in, and you find out she meets this man in India named Sanjay, and that they end up getting married. She went to India to teach English. Then they get married, and Milton is one of their children. And I was curious as to, well, why would you stay in this house with all these people and bad memories after you get married and start a family? But we learned that Sanjay passes away during an earthquake in India because he was a relief expert, like a disaster relief expert. And so with their children, Milton being one of them, Dawn moves back to the house. And so Milton's little room, it's like a little tower. It is so cool. And it has like a firefighter pole that you can slide down at. Or is it a lift?
It's a lift.
It's a lift.
Yeah,
okay.
it's a lift. Yep.
Yeah. Dang. I didn't have that in my bedroom.
The thing with Milton is infinitely interesting, but it's also infuriating. When you're trying to logic together things. The first time I played through, I had played a game called The Unfinished Swan, which was made by the same folks that put this one out. So automatically, like a lot of the stuff there is very reminiscent. You got like the stark white background easels with kind of just the black paint. Some of it's just kind of splattered. Unfinished Swan, you are presented in just like these blank areas. You kind of bring the world to life, figure out what's what by throwing these balls of paint at it. And that's how you kind of find out where things sit, where the walls are, which ways you can and can't go. And a lot of the imagery I thought was very similar. And when I first played through this, I wasn't aware it was the people from that game. So I thought maybe one of the developers is involved because it's too much. It's too much to just be coincidence that both these things look so similar. And then there are aspects of it like this king kind of logo with the crown and all that that looks straight out of the game. And then I found out, okay, it's the same people that did that one. The flip book is kind of eerily similar to the king from Unfinished Swan, which when you play the game, I'm going to try not to spoil that one in case people want to get it. I assume if you're watching this one, you have no trouble with it. I don't want to spoil another game, which I highly recommend playing in the process. But you wake up in this kingdom. You've gotten this unfinished artwork from your mother who's passed. You enter the artwork, and you're in this world of this king who just kind of mysteriously appeared and worked on all these paintings, but never really finished anything. And subsequently has come to find out, someone had brought up to one of the developers if this was just a nod, a little Easter egg, or if this was canon. They speculated that Milton is the king from Unfinished Swan, and the developers actually confirmed it. That Milton is. He did legitimately paint a door with a magic paintbrush. He walked through, and that was that. And as you can see from in his little room, there are like a lot of kind of unfinished paintings and all that, which kind of lend themselves to that story, which is neat until you want to try to make logic out of the game you're in, because we've now been confirmed that there are magic paintbrushes and doors to other worlds and things like that. So it kind of, I don't know if it's just him and we're just supposed to believe, all right, here's one otherworldly happening, everything else in the game you can explain, or if there is indeed something else involved, because if we can be told that magic paintbrushes are a thing in this universe and doors to other worlds, some kind of paranormal or otherworldly supernatural curse could also be possible. So the thing with Milton is it's the coolest Easter egg. It's a really neat tie-in, especially if you want to go and play that game afterwards or before. But yeah,
I haven't. I've worked on it a little bit, but I haven't finished it yet.
Okay, and it's definitely it's great, especially now that you are talking about that in depth to go and play that one. I do recommend probably playing this reveal ever. It was the best because it was just such an incredible tie-in. And thing to do with this character. They obviously are, like Ed said, they kind of push him out there. His missing posters, one of the first things you see, there are stacks of them scattered throughout the game. And it does very much feel like finding him or finding out what happened to him is a big part of it. So for that to be such a character demanding so much attention and for it to be like this, I don't know if it's just a gigantic nod to the other game, or if to get people to go and play it, or if it's just one of those things that says something beyond our understanding occurred with this character. It's not too much to believe that it throughout the game. I don't know. It's one of those things I wish it was not so.
We do see, whenever you're in the crawl spaces, you see little Easter eggs from Milton left around, little drawings that. So, I mean, if you wanted, even though it's canon and it's been confirmed, I guess you could think, okay, he died in one of the crawlway.
Yes, that's one of those things. I wish it wasn't so. I wish it wasn't.
But you know what?
Because that.
I kind of feel like Milton was another cop out. He was just a cheap cop out. Like because when you play through everything, everybody has a grandiose kind of explanation or story told about them. So you really feel emotional to get a kind of idea sense. and it kind of felt like this build up to find out what really happened to Milton was as cool as the idea was a flip book. Why it kind of felt like, okay, you guys must be running out of money or time, development time, because it just felt very cheap. Definitely when you get into like the story after Milton, where is what who was it again?
The story after Milton
yes,
is Lewis.
Yeah, and I don't, one more Milton aside, I always assumed that he didn't get the same treatment because maybe Edie was reluctant, considering he's missing, not confirmed dead, of putting out some, tale that she's been doing, only to have him show up.
Yeah, he could. I mean, yeah.
Maybe with her own baby and kind of leave this one alone. You don't want 30-year-old Milton showing up after you've concocted this tremendous death story for him.
And I do notice, I think it's after you leave his well, it's like his little house. It's not even just a room. Edith says, whatever Milton found in the house, Mom didn't want it getting out. That really caught my attention. What is going on with this house? Is it like Ed said, and it's eating everyone alive? I mean, my goodness. But that's these additions to the house. I think. Well, then you go to a classroom, right? You see where Dawn authored a book about teaching children, and she would teach her own children in this really cute little classroom. And if you pay attention, there's a newspaper clipping, which I was saying about Sanjay, that you learn he died in an earthquake in India. And there's just some cool stuff, like Lewis wrote on his desk, Lewis rules. He carved it on his desk. Just really neat things in that classroom. And then you go to Lewis's room, is like a boat, I believe. They turned a boat into his room.
Yes. And so Lewis is he's working at a tuna factory where he's cutting off the head of fish and he throws it in, and then he begins to daydream. Now he's with a psychologist who is sending a letter to tell about his diagnosis and his progress. And as you're playing, she's telling the story that Lewis was telling her was he was like this kind of king or this adventurer, and the more that you just walk through, you're getting more people like getting a band, and the people are celebrating you, but you're still cutting fish. So you're actually doing two kind of gameplays at once. So if you have your right analog stick, you are moving the fish, it's getting his head cut off, and then you are putting it in the on the conveyor belt. While doing that, your left analog stick is making you walk through it. So you have to kind of keep eye on both of them, what's going on. And then the mom comes and tries to explain to Lewis, we want you to come home, get better, but he's still cutting the fish and he's still lost in his mind.
And you have to play this game for this part. It is brilliant.
This is the masterpiece of them all. Yes. And really it's the one that I think, kind of as an adult, especially myself, someone who has dabbled in a little escapism here and there, the stress of the day, whether it's video games, things like that. I think we've all tried to kind of escape for a little bit here and there. But this is taken to a very extreme degree. And it's just, it deals with how someone just kind of copes with monotony, just a monotonous, almost pointless, kind of life that this guy's living. Just he has just the most menial of tasks, super repetitive, and just sits there, and it gets to the point where his real world and his fantasy world, the fantasy world is looking a lot better, and the real world is looking a lot bleaker. And it's one thing to say that there was some mental health disorder or something like that. I think it's probably obvious. at least in his case. I don't think it is widespread amongst family. I think at least in his case, but there are times also where he has outright, kind of said that he knows what he's doing, that he knows that this is imaginary. And the quote is that his imagination is real as his body. So he has a grasp on what he's doing, but I think it's just someone who has given up on life. And I don't know if that's there is some drug paraphernalia in his room. I mean, we're talking lighter stuff. I don't know if anything else is involved though.
He had
obviously
antidepressants, but he stopped taking them.
Yes.
Yes.
So I would think, and a lot of people pose the theory that this is just mental illness sweeping throughout the family, which I don't think is the case, and I think would be a big discredit because that hinges on a little bit of lazy writing, and I don't think I think these developers have earned our trust that they're not going the lazy route with anything.
Well, I think it's him dealing with a different form of depression because
Yes.
as you play through, you get on the ship and you start taking these places down, and while the narration of the psychologist is telling what's going on, you get to select that if you want to be with the prince or you want to be with the queen or whatever, and you get to the final point where you see him cutting still.
Yeah.
But then you still controlling him, and he's going up the cord. Can I say? I'm about to say corduroy.
The conveyor
belt. And you go through this glass, and you're transported into the kingdom, and you hear all the music. You see that same band, and you see while going up there is this certain instrument, I would say. And you go up the stairs, and they're blocking past all, so you have to follow the path that it leads to. You go up to the stairs, and you're about to be crowned, but the only way that you can be crowned is laying your head down. And the next thing you know, you hear chop. So the idea is that he put his head through the chopper thing at work and chopped his own head off.
And when I first played the game, I was curious about, just the excessive daydreaming. So in 2002, there was a psychiatrist who, I don't know if came up with or discovered, or she began discussing something called maladaptive daydreaming. Did you guys read about that by any chance? It's basically it's a disordered form of dissociative absorption associated with excessive fantasy. And this experience is reported to be extremely rewarding to the extent that some of those who experience it develop a compulsion to repeat it, like to a point of addiction. So, and as you listen to the psychiatrist's letter being read aloud, it sounds like that was his coping mechanism. He's only 22 when he passes away, which I don't know if he has schizophrenia, because like Billy said, he's fully aware of reality versus his daydreams. And do you guys think it was intentional or an accident?
I think it was intentional.
It may have been. It's hard to say. But I do lean towards it being intentional. I think it got to be one of those things where just real world living as it was just not something for him any longer.
To me, when he stopped taking his antidepressants, it really felt that he was just giving in to the mental problems, that he didn't want to fight anymore. He just wanted to let things needed to be, because it made him feel something. It made him feel powerful. And when it made him feel like he was a king, it made him feel on the top of the world. He knew that if he continued to take those antidepressants, all of that would be taken away. And so in order for him to really feel like he's living his true life, in a sense, he just gave in. And so I don't think it was accidental. I think he didn't realize that he continued to carry this this ideal of being king until his final death, and what he just didn't realize that he was still at work with that mentality, because he really wasn't trying to go home. When you are playing the character, you see that you going through this locker room and stuff, and his locker is open, and you just see a different set of a perspective, just like, why is he still cutting, and why are you allowed to go up to this conveyor belt, go through this glass window, and think that you're the idea would have been like, he went through the conveyor belt, he went through the glass window, and he fell and died somewhere, and no one stopped him because there was no other employee in the factory. So I really think that I think he got to the point where he was just like, he kind of thought that he didn't realize that he was in a real world, and he had put his head down and chopped. And what led the symbolism that led to it, and you don't think about it till he actually get his head chopped off, is him actually working at a factory where you cut the heads off. And so while you're controlling, you're cutting fish heads off. So he probably thought the symbolism kind of just like, you are the fish that you don't have no control over somewhat, but your mind is that hand that's controlling you to kill yourself, and that's what happened, and it got rid of you after you got done. So what happened is that he probably went, killed himself, and his mind let him go, and so now he's not living no more. He's not king no more.
And a lot of
it's at the core. I was just pointing out the coronation. One detail I saw for the first time, I don't know how I missed it, was the gigantic Molly cat, which is there. And I think that one thing that makes me think it's intentional is Dawn, the mother's reaction to it. This was, as teased throughout, this was the event that led to her essentially saying, we have got to go. We've got to get away from the house, away from the stories, because I believe and it's like where Edith, I think, was kind of echoing her mother's sentiment that maybe the stories are what's hurting them. I think it wasn't any more evident than in, Lewis's case, where maybe he already has problems or a disorder that would make him more prone to being affected by these. But when you grow up in this world, you're spinning these yarns, and all these other people in the family are able artistically to get things out. I didn't see anything that suggested anything like that with him. So maybe his form of kind of expressing things was inside, was in his own mind. And that's kind of how he expressed himself and got all this out, all this like nearly fantasy world input that was being put in. Milton had his art, Sam had his photography, and maybe that's all he had, was just he kind of dealt with it by slipping away, and it was kind of fueled by you live in a world where dragons attack people, and and you can fly and things like that, and who knows, someone that already was maybe a little more vulnerable or sensitive to things like that, where their mind would go with that.
It was, and I know that people who have dealt with suicidal thoughts or left notes, it's relief. I'm not, and anybody who's listening, I'm not encouraging doing that. It feels like your only escape, your only way to have some kind of relief from whatever's plaguing you mentally.
Yeah.
Because wasn't this Edith's brother?
Yes.
Yes, her older brother.
And
she's the baby.
It's worth mentioning. This was a little bit of a creepy aside here, and I think it's mentioned earlier. When you're in Edie's room initially, it's Edith states that she was working on, because everyone has their own, memorial, usually with like a drawn picture of them, something like that. That Edie was working on Lewis's before the incident. So she obviously maybe kind of had, I don't know, through conversation or just observation, ideas that, he might not be stretching it out. He's kind of breaking down fast. And even creepier thing, and maybe one of the reasons the mother hightailed it out was Edith just kind of mentions that the last time she was in her great grandmother's room, she was painting a portrait of her, which I don't know. You could certainly, and there are theories out there that Edie has worse intentions than but I currently believe. I don't know, but I just thought that was a strange thing, and you can either take it as just painting her great granddaughter's portrait, or you can take it as another kind of shrine in the early stages.
Because Lewis's picture is still in her room, still in Edie's room, not in his room, and Edith and her mom, we learn when we go up to Edith's loft, her room, they left a week after his funeral. And in fact, if at the very beginning, if you look at the fridge, you do see, not an announcement, but you see a card talking about Lewis's surgery, where they're going to take place, the time, and everything. And I just want to say, it would suck if you lived in those rooms and it's raining to have access them during inclement weather.
But who's coming to these funeral things at this point? The family is cleaned out. At the time, I think you are only it's Edith, her great grandmother, who isn't going much longer, and her mother Dawn. I don't know of any other family. So for it to be like a big posted notice for it, that obviously was mailed off. I don't know, because the character didn't strike me as one that had much going on in the outside world as far as friends or anything like that. So I thought that was odd. I could see it. Maybe there is some, maybe there's some family on down there. Maybe there's cousins. Maybe there's in-laws, things like that. But still, I thought that was just an odd touch, especially when you realize at that point in time it was just the three of them that lived in the house, kind of still remaining.
Oh, well, do you think it's like whenever you go to a funeral and you receive a little booklet?
Yeah.
Like a pamphlet.
They do it on their own accord, maybe. Yeah.
No.
Neat thing about when you get to Edith, when you get to her loft, you find out basically the rest of it. You get put on kind of in detail what happened their last night there, why they left as quickly as they did, the fate of the rest of them. You get all that. But before that, when I got in her room, I noticed that there were kind of things that tied in to a lot of other people's stories throughout. She had the little royal playset up there with the kings and all that. She had an astronaut figure, which would go along with Calvin, who that was his thing. She had the plush jellyfish, just like we saw down in Molly's room. She had a little frog, the little toy frog, like we saw from Gregory in the bath. Shark. She had all kinds of other little things there, which led me further down the road of because this is being, like we said several times, that what's taking place here is just what you're reading.
Yes.
This is not your own personal observation. So everything in here is only as true. It's only the version that Edith is wanting to leave for this person reading. And she seemed to be very close to her great grandmother Edie, and very receptive to her stories and whatnot. So I don't know if that stuff being up there implies that Edith also was kind of creatively crafting her own story. How much of these stories that are being told are from Edie? How much are from Edith? It's hard to say. Just when I saw all that, I thought it was obviously in a video game you want to kind of bring things full circle there towards the end. But I thought that that stuff has to be up there for a purpose, especially to have so many callbacks to other deaths throughout. Whether this is something that her and her great grandmother kind of sat down and did together, or that she just so fully embraced it, or it could just be mementos for family members, which would be strange considering that she didn't exactly, she wasn't around for a handful of these demises. So why would you keep any kind of token or anything like that? I thought that was interesting. Just the things that were kind of scattered around her room.
Oh, that's a good point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I did see the little playset with the king
Mm-hmm.
thing. And then she sits down on her bed, and it looks like she takes a quill. Is it?
Yes. Yeah.
Not a regular pen. It's 2010 at the time, or
Mm-hmm.
2017. I'm sorry, 2017, and she takes that quill.
Yes.
She starts writing, and that's when we have the flashback to the dinner with her mother and her great grandmother, and the mother's talking about how they're leaving, and the next day a nursing home van will be going to take Edie to live there. And Edie is drinking some kind of alcohol, and Dawn says, "You're not supposed to mix that with your medications." Edie ignores that comment. So do you guys think she was intentionally drinking alcohol?
Yes, I think it was, and I think she knew the consequences of such. You have to, because that's the absolute last bit of her family that is taking off. I think at that point in time, for one, to experience this was a great grandmother. So this lady has been around. To experience that amount of loss would have to have some, and obviously she cares. Even if it's in a very bizarre and dangerous way, maybe for those around her, she seems to take these deaths very, very deeply, and very hard. And I think it was a combination of just the end of a lot of things. Her family taking off. She's essentially losing her house. She's heading off to assisted living after that. And I think a lot of it, and we see this is a big mysterious point of contention. She has left a gift for Edith, and Edith sits down to begin reading. And I can only imagine it's just a very kind of detailed telling of these stories and things like that. And you don't get much more because Dawn, upon seeing Dawn has, as you can see from a child, with her father Sam, has kind of really been against this whole curse thing, and I think she's seen what it's done to the family. And I think she's had a clarity of her vision that the rest of them haven't, and she doesn't want to see her daughter heading down this same road. So that book is destroyed.
As you kind of get an understanding with Dawn that yes, death is going to happen, but it's not going to happen in the Finch manner. Dawn died a natural death, and then of course Edith, they gave a little hint about her being pregnant. She gives birth to her son, and she passes away giving birth to it. So that is also a natural death that can happen. And when you find out, when you get off the boat, that you are her son, I think maybe 15 or something, and he walks up and he sees the house, and he sees Edith's grave, and he places some flowers on it. And that's kind of how the game ends. Like, you look up and you see the house is kind of still standing, but a little decrepit a little bit. And so that's how the game ends. And so the remainder of Edith Finch is that if you think about it, her remains is in the graveyard at the house. So that's where Edith Finch remains.
Yeah, and that's one way to take it. And it's also in that book that you get Edie's journey to the old house.
Yes, the night
when Edith was born.
Yes.
There's low tide, some phenomenon that causes her to be able to walk out there. And that is where you have your deer encounter, much like the one you had at the beginning of the game. And Sam met his demise by one also. So there's another one there. And Edie, it goes even further. She believes that she walks up and the lights cut on. So I think it just lends itself to her spinning these incredible yarns. But yeah, you find out it's Edith's son that's kind of been reading the contents of the game to us. And what he has is, that's what we have to go off of. And it depends on what his mother wanted to convey to him. And we see from the beginning on the boat, this guy's already got a cast on his arm. He's continuing tradition. Who knows what he's going to get into? If he's smart, maybe he just stays out of that house. But he's there to pay his respects to his mother. And yeah, I think you can go literal. What remains of Edith Finch, or if you want to go physical remains there at the house, what remains of her and the Finch family in general is her son. And I think I took away it's kind of what remains of any of us. When any of us pass along, it's kind of the people we leave behind, family and friends, and it's the stories that are told about us. And and that's what Edie was trying to do, was take these, she's been dealt a shit hand, and she's trying to make the most of it she can by just trying to memorialize these people, trying to leave an amazing story, because that's all that's left of them, all that remains of them. So I think you can take several ways. You can take that, both for Edith and both for just all of us. We want to leave behind people that love us, and we want to leave behind excellent stories for them to be able to tell about us. Some of them maybe a tall tale or two about us. So I think when you're dealing with remains, they're both the kind of the metaphorical and the literal.
I think so too. It's your legacy.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like Shakespeare when he talks about, I'm going to immortalize you in this sonnet, whoever the person is, or but it's kind of like Billy's talked about with the unreliable narrator.
Yes.
There's different versions of all of us, right? Your perspectives of me are different from a family member's perspective of me, a teacher, co-workers. So they're all different stories of us floating around. And I don't know which one would be 100% accurate. We all have perspectives of ourselves, right? And this is something, there was a deer in Edie's little flashback. There's a deer in the fog, which I thought was very bizarre. Is there a deer just running on the beach in the low tide? But it reminded me of the deer in Sam's story and the deer we see at the very beginning of with Edith. And I don't know if deers, does deer symbolize something?
I looked it up and I
I would say no, don't symbolize anything. I think it's because they're in nature. They're not close to a city or a town. They're so much surrounded by woods that it's just nature. Deers just show up. We live on I drive on a highway when I go to work, and a deer would just run across. I live by I have an open big field, and I see deer just walking around everywhere because we have a forest and stuff around here. Even though we're in the city and we're close to a town, deer just show up anywhere. So I don't think it symbolizes anything. If I think the symbolization of the deer would have to be that you see it in everything. So if you was in Gregory's story, you would see a deer right into water. You would, in Barbara's story, you would see a deer as a killer head looking around somewhere. Like you would see deer, you would notice deer stuff in little things here and there, and to be like, what is this particular thing about a deer that is in this narrative, and it's not always there.
I thought it was interesting, the placement of the deer, that it's at the beginning and then it's at the end. So that's what caught my attention, because I love looking up the symbolism of different animals, flowers, anything. I love poetry, I love literature and all the deeper meanings. And deer can represent gentleness, ability to move through life with obstacles with grace. I could be reading way too much into this, but this game lends itself to have you think beyond the normal scope of your logic, for sure. But then, of course, I don't know how gentle a deer is since Sam died. Because
that's the thing. That's the thing.
Yeah. So, but everybody, that is going to be our discussion. Any final words, Celeste? What would you have to say about this game? Final words.
Please play it. If you have not played it, please play this game. I played it for the first time November 2019. The title alone is captivating. What Remains of Edith Finch? My goodness, that is purely amazing marketing right there. And I could not stop thinking about this game. And this is one of those games, I'm on the subreddit. I'm reading people's theories. I will look up online essays. I will watch video essays. We're going to have an almost 3-hour long discussion about it today.
Oh, of course, going to
just me. This game makes my little symbolism and literature heart happy. And it's brilliant. And I think good art, and I consider video games art, it keeps you wondering. It keeps you talking about it. It can make you uncomfortable. I appreciate that I had to play as a little baby in the bathtub. It made me uncomfortable, but that is a reality a lot of people face. So if you want, this game is, you can complete it depending on how fast you move, 2 to 3 hours.
Yeah.
Easy afternoon, morning, evening playthrough, and then you can play through it again and pick up things you didn't see the first time around. So I really appreciate that we did this for the book club.
Yes. Billy, what do you have to say about this game? Final words.
I can echo all those sentiments that Celeste just gave us. I think, I don't think it's even an argument. I remember about a decade ago, it was really PS2, kind of PS3 era, the our video games art argument really ramped up. And there are people on both ends. I think, like Celeste said, this one truly is. If you ever want to win anybody over to your side of the argument, this would be the one to sit them down with. I can see there's going to be people that don't like this game. If you want some taste, if you want something with even a hint of action to it, you might want to stay away. But still, if you love a good story in a game, if you love a mystery, if you want something that when you cut the game off, you're still thinking about it, you're laying in bed that night thinking about it, you're just waiting to play it again, this is it. I finished this thing for the first time. It was recommended to me by another fellow on my podcast that knows I love good walking game. I love walking around exploring. And I played this. I bought it that day and I sat down immediately. Like she said, it's not a long play. It's smooth. It's one of those that's over before you know it. 2 hours if you want to run through. For this, I gave it a really just over, no stone unturned playthrough. And it was still just about 4 hours. So it's you get as much into it as you want. But you can sit down. It's a nice one if you have like-minded people that love to see a good story. This is going to be more enjoyable than most movies you could dig up. I love this style of game, and there's none better than this. This is one of the best stories I've heard told throughout a video game, and it's done with the full range of emotions. You're going to laugh throughout this thing. The old cliche, you're going to laugh, you're going to cry and whatnot. It rings true here. This thing is going to take you for a ride. I can't recommend it enough. And if you've played through it already, listening to this, you're probably lining up another playthrough right now. You probably got that hankering to get back in it. And if you're listening to this and you haven't played through it, don't think that means you're not still going to get something from it. These stories are very impactful, more than we can sit here and we could take forever to discuss these things, and I guess we have. But it's much more impactful to sit there and play through it. So I turn this thing off. Turn it off. Get out there and play.
Well, not yet. They can't turn
Wait about 10 minutes. Turn this thing off.
There is no other medium that I think that could convey this story. I don't. A movie, a story, a movie, a book. There's no way.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So I'm going to say this. Yes, I do recommend everybody play this, and there's going to be some illogical stuff that's going to make you kind of mad. I will say people who are just finding narrative. I always use this example that people who think God of War has the best narrative and story and just feel like they found it. I'm like, no, narrative games have always been out. You just haven't seeked out. What Remains of Edith Finch is one that people should seek out, because not only does it tell these stories, it's a graphically different things for them to address those stories. Yeah. So you might get something in 3D, but then you got Barbara's story that's in a comic book fashion, and then it's just like you continue to go on, and you even when you get to Gregory's story, most of his is musical based. Yeah. Even though you see all of this stuff is going on, so they are telling these stories in different ways. And my last thing that I recommend people do, there's a thing called FMV. And for people who don't know too much about FMV, that was full motion video back in the 90s. So you have Night Trap, and you had other Sega CD games like the Crisscross Make My Video and Marky Bunch. You had all of this stuff doing different interactive things, and then like I think mid 2015 or whatever, we got games like Her Story that was also a narrative game, but you enter codes to find out how the story was sold. And that's another form of narrative that people should go out and seek. With what we mentioned, Edith Finch, is not hard, and it's going to get you emotionally. It's going to make you think. It's going to make you want to research and talk about it. But it's done so well in a great way, a great presentation, that you might not like it at the first time you play through, but go in the second time, knowing everything, and spend time to find out. Because a lot of people just want to feel like, well, how does this game end, without realizing what the game is meaning, what the game is trying to deliver.
It's about the journey, not the destination.
Yes.
That's right. That's right.
And then
that's the thing.
Go ahead.
And that's the thing. I think a lot of games today are made to be kind of a disposable product. You pick it up for $15, you play through it. If you get a few hours of enjoyment out of it, that's great. Let me pick up the next, kind of cookie cutter game. So to have something like this is a real gem right here. And it's available every system I know of. And I've dipped on this one so many times now. I've triple dipped on it. But no matter what you're playing on, it's there for you. A special recommendation. I had a great experience playing this kind of on the Switch in handheld mode. Get you a nice dark room, like right before bed. Just kind of sit up there, play through it. It's a much more kind of intimate experience, just kind of sitting there playing. So that was excellent. But no matter what system you have, PC, whatever, it's there for you. If you're ready to, play a game with some real narrative to it. And it's not, let's go save the princess. It's not, let's go, we got to kill this bad guy here. It's not going to be one of those that hold your hand either. I think Ed was kind of saying people want to just see how it ends. You finish that thing and good luck. If you're just playing through to get an ending, you're missing out on so much of it, because every journal, Every little nook and cranny of that house is a puzzle piece,
Yeah.
and you can finish it with a lot of pieces missing, and maybe walk away satisfied. But
And
yeah,
I think it's a good game if you have finished it years ago.
yeah,
Play it now again because you
yes.
might now have a different perspective of it.
Mhm.
So, uh,
Yes, yes.
Billy, where can we find you at?
You got a few places. I get together with a couple other fellas, and we do a podcast weekly. Well, bi-weekly. We have a Patreon episode one week and a regular one, which you can find anywhere you can find podcasts the other week. It's Retrovaniacs. We do games, basically console games from the beginning of consoles at home on through right now. Our cutoff is that PS2, original Xbox, GameCube era. It's very kind of free discussion, a lot of user interactivity in there, whether it's people writing in, discussing old games. A lot of people want to discuss what we eat. And I'm there for it. I'll talk Taco Bell with you all evening.
We
And we have.
me and
Uh,
Celeste have snacks to talk about.
Oh yeah.
and but we do that. You can catch us on Twitch. I usually man that channel. It's been out for about a week and a half as I've started a new job, but I am firing it back up later in the week. It's also Retrovaniacs. And our Twitter, apparently we didn't make it easy and make everything Retrovaniacs. The Twitter is retrovania.net. And that also happens to be our website, retrovania.net, where you can kind of check out everything. We have all of our links on there. So
Very awesome. Yeah, and that's how I met
Hello?
Billy is because I found out about their podcast a year ago, and I was curious if anybody had ever covered Earthbound.
I never.
And then I realized they had a ton of episodes for
I
me to
never
catch
touched
up
them.
on, and it's just growing and growing. Y'all been
Yes.
doing it for what, 5 years?
Oh, it's 5 years now. I don't like to think about the passage of time because then I get the old existential dread creeps up on me. Uh,
Oh no, don't think of that.
no, 5 years strong. I think it's
All right.
definitely one of those that gets better. I do not recommend listening to any episodes before maybe 5 or 6. But no, it's a lot of fun, and it's especially been great now that we are so interactive with everybody. With the Twitch channel, and we kicked off a Discord and things like that. So it's been great interacting with everyone, and I always love hearing everyone's old memories, like their first games growing up. You shared some of gaming with your father. I've done, God, the same. My countless memories of my father shouting, not angrily, but just shouting commands while we're trying to play through Contra on the NES with just 3 lives. He got us through it, so hats off to him. But yeah, it's a blast, and I'm thrilled you guys have me on here. I have not been able to talk about this game at the length I would like ever. I played through this on the channel and talked about it, and probably will again. I think people are doomed to watch me play this game for quite some time and every time, even as in depth as I looked at it this time. Next time I play through, I guarantee I'm going to spot things that I haven't yet.
Isn't that a gem? That's
Yes.
a true treasure piece.
Yes.
And I would be perfectly fine, Ed, hint, hint, if we do more walking simulators for book club in the future, because there are some that I just like. If I keep holding it in, I'm going to explode with my thoughts and theories on some of these.
I mean, we have Gone Home. We have Firewatch. I think there's another one that
Sagebrush. You got to play Sagebrush.
Yeah, and there's
I've
everybody's
never heard of that.
And everybody's gone to the Rapture.
Yeah.
I heard of that one, but never played it.
That is.
We're about to start another episode right
now. That's a top 3 one for me.
So I should buy that one.
Yeah, that's a Steam and PS4 title, I believe. Yeah, so it's out there to be had. And
highly recommended.
It's wonderful. Only warning I'll give you is that of all the walking sims, this has got the slow.
Oh no, it cut out a little bit.
Well, Celeste, where can we find you at?
Oh gosh, I need to know what Billy said. Oh, Billy, you cut out. You
Did
said
Did I cut off?
It's okay.
Yeah.
You were saying out of all the walking sims.
Oh. No, I'm gonna leave it. I'm gonna leave it on that suspense.
It's the
slowest.
It's the slowest
one.
Oh, the slowest one. Okay.
But it also has the most beautiful scenery. Still one of the best looking games I've ever played.
Yes, it's the prettiest one I've played.
I will put it on my calendar to pick up. So that's where can we find you?
I am on Twitter and Instagram at Fairy Crypt. Instagram's mostly food, makeup, my cats. Twitter is mostly video games, and I have completely deactivated Facebook as of January, so you cannot find me there.
That's a good move. That's a good move.
You guys can find me on Twitter at That Pressure Code. You can check out more of my podcast, Optional Opinion, on SoundCloud and other podcast apps. You can check out more of Boss Rush Podcast on bossrushgames.com and on our YouTube page, Boss Rush Games, and on our Twitch page at Boss Rush Games. Check out more podcast shows like Nintendo Pop Block, Arsenal X, Tarbo's Casserole, 1v1, and more book club. Me, Jesse, and Corey had a discussion on Tomb Raider, so you guys can check that out. We are gearing up to do Okami and soon to do Rhyme. This month we are playing Rhyme, so you guys can play that along with us. This one that was a special one because, like I said, we have been talking about this, and we may do more walking simulators. We'll see how it goes because Gone Home, I know it's going to be one where it's going to be an interesting discussion if we decide to do that one. We'll have to work out the kinks because there's a lot of panels and stuff planned and going on. Trust me. But everybody, have a great week. Have a great weekend. Have a great day whenever you're seeing this. Please do pick up what Remains of Edith Finch. Like I said, is available on Windows, Xbox One, PS4, PS3, and Nintendo Switch. So you guys, I think it may be on Xbox 360 too. Anyone still got that. But you guys can find the game there. Like I said, we all three recommend picking it up and giving it a playthrough and just enjoying the stories that are presented to you. With that, everybody, we will see you. Sorry about that. With that, everybody, we will see you next time on Boss Rush Podcast. Bye, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.